Hello everyone, this is Free Russia Forum channel. I am Daniil Konstantinov, and I can happily say that we are back to our regular format that is called Global State of Affairs with Garry Kasparov. Garry, hello. Hello, and I would like to apologize for having a bit chaotic screen in the backdrop. I'm in a hotel room and I try to do everything to make the contrast as good as possible. Yeah, it's fine. We can see you very well. And I would like to ask the audience to like our video so that it will be promoted on YouTube. And I will be asking you to do it along the way. So, Garry, the first question that everybody is concerned about, and not only in the United States, but we are talking about the United States. Globally, it's a great concern. Have you seen the debates? Well, it's a strange question because, of course, I watched the debates and I commented the debates on Twitter and I spoke to my friends, but in fact, it's kind of a sad show, and it's kind of diplomatically speaking, because America got to the point when they're choosing between the people who are, one of them is physically kind of incapable to perform his functions after 7 days of preparations in using the most effective means of modern medicine, and also rehearsing all the questions that were quite obvious. And one of the correspondents of CNN said that Biden was completely informed to what he's going to be asked. But what we've seen is just disgrace of the Democratic Party, because they continue being hostages of ambitions of the person who was elected 4 years ago as an alternative to Trump, to bring the country back to normal, so to speak. And nobody had any great expectations that Biden will stay for 8 years, and now you can see that his physical state is not good for that. And even the debates in the kind of sterile atmosphere, without audience, with turned off mics when they finished their turn of talking, 2 minutes, and Trump, who stayed within the kind of frame for 15 minutes, and then he kind of went off. And he's ready to revenge for everything. And he became really audacious when he realized that Biden can't really respond to him. So if nothing changes, then of course Trump will be the president. I think yesterday there was a historical day, because more and more Democrats, they're asking for open convention, and the convention should begin from the clean slate. And yet Republicans were happy yesterday, but I don't think that they'll like this layout, because I think that any reasonable Democrat of moderate views, say governor, who can actually handle such a talk. And this can be fatal for Trump, because negative ratings of Trump are very high, and even in this situation there are still many people who can vote for anybody. And we have Biden with Kamala Harris, who is unpopular either. I think this can be quite a present for Trump. But on the other hand, yesterday's debate can underscore this lengthy agony. I think that America should be able to choose from normal candidates and not to make a choice from 2 pensioners, one of whom barely speaks and the other one wants to set on fire the home for elderly, where they should be. If we are talking about possible candidates from Democrats, who can they be? See, some people speculating about Michelle Obama, and I think it's hardly possible. I don't think that she will want to get in the game. She has lots of skeletons in the closet, and I think these are just talks. The most probable is the governor of California. And I think this will be a serious mistake, because California is on the brink of bankruptcy. His policy is a splitting policy. It splits the society. That's why Governor Newsom is not a good choice, but they're going to consider him. Obviously, the ideal choice would be a governor from some state in the middle of the United States. For example, Miss Whitmer of Michigan. It's a woman, and she has very moderate views. It's a key state, and I think it would be a great solution. Some people say to remove Kamala Harris from the race, number one should be a woman, so that it would be a reason to get rid of Kamala Harris, and she's a deadweight. If Democrats have a political will to choose a moderate governor, a governor from the state that is in the middle, then Trump will be doomed. The thing is that in the Democratic Party, there is no unity. In the party, there is very strong left wing, and right now they're losing primaries, very interesting primaries 2 days ago. They were in New York, and I think one of the members of ultra-progressivist of the party, they lost primaries, and I think it's quite indicative, and he lost quite significantly. In fact, there's a chance to turn the situation around, but the Democrats, they need political will. And besides that, Biden needs to say these words. Looking at him yesterday, I don't think he understands how bad things were after the debates. Trump keeps boasting and keeps saying that when he was president, Putin never attacked Ukraine, and when he'll become the president again, he will be able to resolve the issue within 24 hours. Do you think there is any truth in these words, or he is just boasting? Well, yesterday he said that he's going to do that even before he is elected. He said that he will win the election and he'll resolve the issue even before the inauguration. Well, Trump is boasting. Nevertheless, he can come up with some sort of interim solution. And because he will be able to offer Putin such conditions that Putin will accept. And for Ukraine, it will be very difficult to resist that. Though there is Europe, and many things depend on how Europe is going to take what Trump is going to offer. The President of the United States has a lot of tools to be able to impact the results of the war. And if we follow Trump, this is what he says: I'm going to make them to sit down at the negotiation table, and if Ukraine refuses to do that, we won't give them weapons, but if Putin refuses, we give Ukraine so many weapons that Putin won't be able to fight in this war. So it's quite primitive, though, and everything is kind of linear, and things don't work linear. While Putin is in power, the war will not end, and Trump doesn't understand that because he is a bit limited, so to speak. And he sees the whole world through the lens of deals, kind of half criminal business. It's kind of quid pro quo. But nevertheless, we know that he will undertake such actions. And will they impact the war? Maybe. I think he can achieve ceasefire, but it will be to the benefit of Putin, because Putin now is encountering growing problems, and stopping the war at the separation line will give Putin a strategic break. And that's why right now Trump is not talking about the end of the war. He's talking about the ceasefire and the stop of military actions. But we need to understand the war will not end while Putin is in power, and everybody can understand that. Just a normal person who can analyze those facts and listen to what Putin is saying in Russian propaganda, so that's what's going to be. But to stop military actions, so what's going to happen? It will put the war in a prolonged phase, and here it's important to understand what the Europeans will be doing, because Trump's threat changes Europe too. And if Europe is ready to support Ukraine without the United States, which is actually possible, economic potential of Europe is more than enough to provide Ukraine with everything that Ukraine needs. The only thing that they need from the United States is not to impede the use of American weapons, and Europeans have a lot of American weapons. In any case, Trump can do a lot of damage, not only in Ukraine, but around the globe too. Our colleague Alfred Koch He always says that this break for Putin as part of the armistice is not that bad because it will be a break for Ukraine too. And during this break, Ukraine will be able to restore its military potential, get more new weapons, and get ready for the next cycle of confrontation. So do you think there is truth in it? Any break of the bloodshed has its advantages. They'll stop killing people. And clearly it will give them some repose. How this repose will be used, that's another thing. Clearly, Putin's goal will be to continue the war when the moment comes, and he will use this repose to get out of the sanction regime. He won't be able to lift all of them, but he'll ask to lift the most painful ones. And I don't know, again, how Trump is going to link sanctions with the liberation of the territories. And any lifting of sanctions will be a great victory for Putin. And the war is the permanent state, and this is how the regime is working. Putin will use this repose to get settled on the conquered territories, and he will be getting closer to Ukrainian border, and this repose will help Putin to regroup. Because his goal is to continue the war. How Ukraine will use this repose, obviously Ukraine will be getting ready for it too, but we need to understand that this is just a repose before resumption of the war. The problem with Trump is that he doesn't quite understand that because he's a bit limited. His view of the world is limited, and this dealing, quid pro quo, I'll give you this, you give me that. This is his approach. This is his philosophy that he uses kind of in the market. But you can't use it for resolving geopolitical issues because Putin's goal is to continue the aggression and to continue this confrontation with the Western world. Besides, can seriously damage American democracy. Yesterday, we heard quite blunt statements from him at the end when he kind of unleashed it, that Biden should be put in prison and many other things. The scale of the problem is hard to understand because Trump is very unbalanced, and many things depend on what people will bring with him to the power. But let's say this, yesterday's debate was catastrophic for Biden, and it's kind of the last signal for the Democrats that they need to change the candidate. They need to understand there is a lot at stake, and to leave the power in shaking hands of Biden, and he can't really read properly from teleprompter. You can't leave the fate of American democracy in his hands. And in many ways, globally, it's the same. There are great changes in leadership in the EU. Yesterday they said that Joseph Borrell will be replaced by Kaja Kallas, and I immediately recall that you know her and you met her, and it would be great to find out from you what your opinion have about her and what policy she may be following. I think policy of Kaja Kallas is pretty certain. She's even on the Russian terrorist list, and she's probably the only Western politician who is on the international wanted list. Putin understands very well what to expect from Kaja Kallas. Clearly, when she was Prime Minister of Estonia, she was limited, but now being a High Commissioner, and in her responsibilities, she has security policy, and she becomes the vice president too, and all that actually requires voting too, but principal agreements are made among the factions of European Commission. And Portugal socialist Costa, he'll become the head of Euro Council. Kaja Kallas and European Socialists, I think, the biggest factions, they are going to vote together. But again, the election is still on the way, and we'll see what's going to happen. But if everything goes as planned, Kaja Kallas will be the third person in the European Union hierarchy. For us, it's a good news, And for Putin it's a bad news, because nobody is going to cut him any slack, and they will be tougher on Russia in this confrontation. And there was another news, not as noticeable with all these big appointments. In PACE, they made a decision, in my view, the decision that sends quite a signal to Russia. And this signal is in our favor. Yesterday, Eric Anils Cross, Estonian deputy, just like Kaja Kallas, is in the top list of Putin's enemies. Eric is very principled about Russia and about all the Russia's aggressive actions. And the fact that two Estonian politicians are in such high positions, it means that in Europe they begin to understand what's going on. They were trying to avoid the direct confrontation with Putin, but now they know it's a war, and during the war you have to have people on the key positions, the people that understand what's going on. And we can see this trend, and it's quite positive for us. Yesterday's presidential debates in the US were quite indicative, and a high probability of Trump's coming back in power. All these factors made Europeans be more proactive. What about the candidate of new Secretary General of NATO, Mark Rutte? Well, it's quite obvious it was a compromising figure, and I think there are no any reasons for him to be warm towards Putin. And we shouldn't forget MH17, the destroyed aircraft with almost 200 Dutch citizens. 10 years passed since then, and as I understand, Russia left all the talks about it, and this is another crime of Putin's regime, and it happened during Rutte's term. And I don't see any grounds for Rutte's policy or his actions be soft. Secretary General of NATO is a diplomat, and he has to accept many points of view. But I think he will be just as consistent as Stoltenberg, and I would say that the situation is moving towards more confrontation. I wouldn't expect any steps towards making peace with Russia. So if we move to the eastern part of the big chessboard, and this is about Putin's trip to North Korea and his unprecedented friendship with Kim Jong-un, and I think this rapprochement actually shows us that the main eastern player, China, is kind of moving towards periphery, right? No, China is not moved to periphery. Obviously, any actions that Kim makes, he can't do them without Chinese approval. The question is what China's role in this war. On the other hand, the goal is pretty clear. They're trying to weaken the West and Russia. And China keeps demonstrating its territorial claims to Russia's territory. It's about 1.5 million kilometers, the territory that Russia took away from China in 1860, when China was weak and its territories were taken over by other countries. And Vladivostok is called Haishevei, and there is a Chinese custom there. It's the territory up to Baikal Lake, and China considers these lands its own. And I meet Chinese businessmen. They don't like talking about politics. A few days ago, I was at a big conference, and as soon as you speak about politics, they have their stone faces on. But as soon as you get to territory talking, their faces change. Of course, it's China. They say Russian Far East. Clearly, it's not going to happen tomorrow. But given the demographic situation in Russia, and it's catastrophic, Putin's war brought a lot of catastrophes to the region. The number of men is even less. And if you look at all the factors, demographic and economic and political, and then the process of devouring Russia's Far East by China is going in full speed, and for China this war is very beneficial. And for China, if Kim Jong-un sends his soldiers to Ukraine, like million soldiers, fine, who cares? The main thing is that Putin is getting weaker, Ukraine is getting weaker, the West is getting weaker, but China is moving. But I think China's plans to expand are there. Historically, Far East was Chinese. Russia came there not too long ago. Russia has been there for 400 years, but China probably 2,500 years in Far East. So that's why I think China is playing a very cautious game. They're trying not to confront the United States. They always do something in terms of sanctions. That's why there is a resource to use other countries, for example, Central Asia countries, China uses to help Russia. But this help is not critical. It could have been done more. China is using the war to promote its own interests. For example, now China is going to build a railroad through Kyrgyzstan, and it's quite interesting what kind of gauge they're going to use. It's going to be a Russian standard gauge or a narrow gauge. So there is a feeling that China considers the war as a great opportunity, not only to expand its full footprint in Central Asia and get its territories back from Russia, but also form a new trade way around Russia to connect with Europe without being dependent on Russia. Actually, not so many people know, but Putin already gave China some territories, and those territories, in fact, are bigger than Crimea. Yes, this process is going gradually, and I think it's started even at the beginning of Putin's ruling. Some islands, part of the river, and many other things. But frankly, these are just little things. Because in fact, China has even a more ambitious program. We know that Primorye region is economically dependent on China, and they're building such connections with China that Primorye region will be part of China soon. And I think China today has more economic impact in that region than Moscow. Commercial news. They tell us that Chinese banks and other countries that used to help Putin's regime avoid sanctions, Turkish banks, Central Asia banks, they gradually stop their operations with Russian banks. Will we see a complete termination of such operations or not? Well, in fact, the process is slowly going, and it shows us the mentality of today's American administration, and this administration is trying to use the sanctions to make Russia get at the negotiation table. No matter what we say about Trump, but in fact, Biden's administration never wanted Ukraine to fully win in the war. But the process is going, it's a bureaucratic story, I'd say. And this process, sadly, affects many Russians who are anti-Putin. I would say that the main goal of Russian opposition today, or in immigration, is to make our community legal in Europe. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of people, or even a million of such people, and any new sanctions of European Union or American sanctions, they put under pressure the people who are immigrants. And I think Kaya Kallas and Eric Cross, these are the people who understand these issues, and they'll begin to help us. And again, Trump's shadow, so to speak, will make Europeans take proper measures. And I think in the near future, next 6 months or 8 months, we'll see some progress in creating this virtual state-free Russia? Yes, you kind of preempted my question, and I also share this hope. I hope it will happen. So let's see what's happening in the Middle East and what happens with the conflict of Israel and Palestine, Hamas, what the Western world does, and we can see that in the Western world we see that pro-Palestinian movement is growing, and support for Israel is going down. So what do you think about it? I don't think that the support for the bandits is growing. It's kind of the same, but now it's more obvious. The Palestine Liberation Organization was created in 1964, even before the Six-Day War. Back then, the territories where today's Palestine was supposed to be created were controlled by Arabic countries. The 1947 decision of the UN did not imply creation of Palestine. There was Israel and territories given to Egypt and Jordan. How they're going to deal with this, not clear. In fact, lots of Palestinians were killed in this war with Jordanians. And all of these were internal skirmishes. Israel was considered by the Palestine Liberation Organization, that was masterminded by KGB. Israel was considered to be a historical mistake that should be corrected. And before the Six-Day War, their goal was to destroy the state of Israel, and they're still trying to achieve this goal. As Putin said, there is no Ukraine. You can have whatever negotiations you want, but Putin's goal is clear, and it's Russian propaganda is communicating this. There is no Ukraine, there is no such a nation as Ukrainian, so this is the position that Putin stands for. And the same happened in the Middle East. Yes, there was a moment when Yasser Arafat in 1993 decided to hold negotiations. And the only reason was that the USSR fell apart. There were a few years when Palestinians were ready for negotiations. Iran wasn't as strong. But as soon as they got their sponsors back, KGB was back there and Iran is back, so the question is closed. The Palestinians continue their things. Hamas is more radical part of Palestine, but nevertheless, they're not ready for two states in that region. They consider it as their own territory, and Israel is something that in one way or another should be devoured as part of this Palestinian state, and Israel is fighting for its survival. But Hamas's actions, well, that's clear that on October 7th, they made it according to the direct order of Putin, and it was absolute atrocity, and it was part of the political calculation to distract the West from Ukraine. Why they would demonstrate all these atrocities and record it on camera to make Israel respond. Putin needs this conflict. Sadly, this conflict is expanding, and we can see that with the Western community allowing it, and they keep pretending that they're dealing with peer partners, but in fact it's a conflict between civilization and barbarism. It is clear that Hezbollah is getting ready for a massive aggression in the north of Israel, and it's quite possible that Israel will have to respond because thousands of rockets are launched at your cities. You'll have to respond. Sadly, while we have Putin and Iran, the Middle East issue is not going to be resolved, only because bandits want this war to continue. And Israel have to look back at the global community. If the bomb is dropped in the wrong place, immediately it's in New York Times. So if Israel can do the same that Putin does in Ukraine, the war would be ended in a couple of days. But Israel is a civilized democratic country, and they have to follow certain norms. And you're right when you said that in the West, everything that Israel does is immediately criticized. Though Western countries, they have to take the responsibility for feeding Hamas, and tens of billions of dollars were poured to Gaza, and they could have done something like in Dubai or Singapore, but what they did, They built these underground fortresses to start a war with Israel. So using Western money, Hamas built such an infrastructure that Israel can't still liquidate. So thank you very much, Gary, and I see that we've been on air for 30 minutes, and remember what you told me, that you have to go, so we'll let you go. Thank you very much for being with us. So we will be waiting for positive changes. Yes, we'll wait for them. Thank you very much. I would like to ask our audience to like our stream. And as I can see that more than 1,500 people were watching us. It's a pretty good result for one stream, so please like our stream to promote it in YouTube. I would like to remind you that today's guest was Garry Kasparov, politician and co-founder of Free Russia Forum and the 13th chess champion. So he was here for the traditional interview, Global State of Affairs, and we'll try to do it so that it would be regular. I am Daniil Konstantinov, Free Russia Forum. Thank you for being